In 1904, over 1,000 Filipinos were caged and displayed like animals. But this wasn't about racism alone. It was a masterclass in psychological dehumanization. A tactic still used today to control entire populations. Picture this. 1904, World's Fair in St. Louis. Over 1,100 Filipinos transported across the ocean. Stripped of dignity. Placed in an exhibit called the Philippine Village. Crowds gathered daily to stare. To mock. To consume the spectacle. But here's what most people miss. This wasn't spontaneous public curiosity. It was orchestrated. Carefully planned. Psychologically engineered by those in power. The fair's organizers worked with government officials. They needed something. A reason to justify colonization. A narrative that made conquest seem natural. Almost necessary. So they created a visual story. They showed Filipinos as primitive. Less evolved. Not quite human. This is where mass control begins. Not with laws. Not with force alone. But with a simple psychological trick. Making people see others as different. As less than. Once you achieve that, everything else becomes possible. Psychologists have studied this for decades. The process of dehumanization follows a pattern. First comes the label. A simple word or phrase that marks a group as other. In this case, words like savage and primitive became weapons. Not because they were true, but because they were repeated. Everywhere. In newspapers. In speeches. In textbooks. Repetition creates belief. Your brain begins to accept what it hears most often as fact. Then comes the visual reinforcement. The exhibition forced thousands to see these people caged. See them stripped of context. Stripped of their culture's complexity. The human mind is vulnerable to what psychologists call the illusory truth effect. Exposure alone creates familiarity. Familiarity breeds acceptance. So when millions saw Filipinos displayed as animals, something shifted in their minds. It wasn't conscious. It was automatic. The propaganda had done its work. And the terrifying part? This exact technique is still deployed today. In media. In narratives about entire groups. The method never changes. Only the targets do. What gave this exhibition its power wasn't just the spectacle. It was authority. The World's Fair wasn't some fringe event. It was sanctioned by the US government. Endorsed by prominent scientists of the time. Anthropologists. Academics. People the public trusted. This is crucial to understand. When authority figures legitimize dehumanization, it becomes invisible. It stops feeling like propaganda. It feels like fact. Like science. Like truth. The Filipinos weren't just displayed by random people. They were displayed under the banner of progress. Of evolutionary science. This added a psychological layer of legitimacy that made the narrative almost unquestionable. Your brain is primed to trust authority. It's an evolutionary advantage. In small groups, trusting the leader kept you alive. But in mass societies, this instinct becomes a vulnerability. Leaders can exploit it. They can tell the public almost anything if they wrap it in the language of authority and science. The fair's organizers understood this instinctively. Or perhaps they studied the psychology deliberately. Either way, the result was devastating. Millions accepted a lie because those in power told it. Here's a detail that matters. The Filipinos in the exhibit were kept separate. Isolated from the rest of the fair's visitors in meaningful ways. They were given limited autonomy. Limited voice. Limited ability to tell their own story. This wasn't accidental. Isolation is a core tool of psychological manipulation. When you cut a group off from the narrative. When they can't speak for themselves. The people in power control what gets said about them. The narrative becomes one-sided. Unchallenged. Psychologists who study mind control have found that isolation amplifies suggestibility. When people can't access alternative information, they accept the dominant story. The Filipinos couldn't defend themselves on a mass scale. Their voices were literally and figuratively silenced. The American public heard only what authorities wanted them to hear. This is why controlling the narrative is so powerful. It's not just about spreading lies. It's about preventing the truth from competing. Once you isolate a group and control their representation, you can make the public believe almost anything about them. The mechanism is psychological, but the consequences are very real. You might think this was a relic of a darker time. But the architecture of this control system never went away. It evolved. It adapted. It became more sophisticated. Today we see it everywhere. In how certain groups are portrayed in media. In how narratives are constructed and repeated until they feel like common sense. In how certain voices are amplified while others are silenced. The dehumanization process works the same way it always did. Label a group as other. Repeat the narrative until it becomes automatic in people's minds. Use authority figures to legitimize the story. Isolate that group from the broader conversation. Control who gets to speak and what they're allowed to say. The tools are different now. We have algorithms. We have social media. We have cable news. But the psychological principles are identical to 1904. The human mind hasn't changed. Our vulnerabilities to manipulation remain the same. Understanding this isn't about blame. It's about awareness. Once you see the pattern, you can't unsee it. You become harder to manipulate. You start questioning narratives instead of accepting them automatically. That's the real power of psychology. Not control, but liberation through understanding. This is the Mind Architect. If you want to master the psychology of influence and protect your mind from manipulation, grab the free guide in the bio. Like this video and subscribe for more dark psychology insights. Your mind is powerful. Protect it.